Hello and welcome to Gym with Gwen. I'm Oliver Gwynn. This is where I give my off-the-cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing, data, and philosophy. This week I'm talking about how economic forces can affect your business. And the main problem for a lot of businesses is they are forecasting based on this perfect world, everything stays the same, and then something big happens in the world, changes everything, and they don't know what to do with it. They have to react quickly. So first of all, let's just discuss how can different economic conditions impact your subscribers, your customers, your retention. First of all, there's inflation and budget pressure. So inflation basically means that everything gets more expensive. Inflation reduces purchasing power and it forces prioritization because people have the same amount of money, but they can afford less with it. And so discretionary purchases will feel pressure first, typically. If your subscription or your app or your tool or your brand or whatever it might be doesn't feel like it's vital, then it's much more likely to be cut out, and something that might have been a once a week habit becomes a once a month habit, and so on and so forth. So consumers typically react faster than businesses, and small companies react faster than enterprises to inflation and budget pressure. Economic stress does not hit all segments equally, of course. Second thing is recessions and spending cuts. So during downtime, individuals cut discretionary spend again, while businesses initiate vendor consolidation and cost scrutiny. Churn often lags conditions, and that's really important to think about. So annual subscribers will hold until the next point. They're going to be masked in your data, and you don't realize necessarily that there's a big decline on the rise because you still have sort of 70% of your user bases. So economic impact rarely appears immediately in sort of aggregate numbers, and that's really important to mention. Also, recessions are kind of interesting because what we've seen in the past is that people tend to forego bigger purchases and they actually do more little purchases. So people will forego their holidays, but then they will spend more on takeouts and stuff like that. Whether if you have a recession and things are inflation, then maybe you can't do either of those things. Currency and regional effects. So international bases sort of have hidden price charges when exchange rates shift or when there's tariffs randomly added to things. And so customers paying in weakening currencies effectively experience price increases, creating region-specific churn patterns that have nothing to do with product quality. So if you are in America right now and you are trading with other people, then the cost of that has gone up for every single person in your nation, whether you like it or not. And if you are visiting America, then the cost has probably also gone up there. But the main thing underpinning all of these is psychology and uncertainty. So economic anxiety alone can affect your retention more than possibly the actual reality of it. Even if customers are not directly impacted financially, they may reduce certain commitments due to that uncertainty. So confidence indicators often predict recession and retention pressure before financial hardship appears. And how do we model across these sort of economic scenarios? What should we be looking for? The first is to segment by economic sensitivity. So instead of treating all customers equally, we segment by characteristics that predict resilience, financial resilience, or vulnerability. So we look at things like pricing tiers, discount usage, payment behavior, if you're B2B, business size, geography, talking about currency earlier, usage trends, all sort of signal economic sensitivity. Price sensitivity obviously being the main one to look for. Any sort of payment friction, customers will typically churn more during downtimes. If you are into B2B, then like enterprise, infrastructure dependent, high usage customers tend to remain more stable. Then we have to think about scenario planning. So once those segments are identified, model retention shifts under different conditions, and moderate downturns may disproportionately affect small businesses, and bigger downturns may affect certain kind of purchases more than smaller ones. And so what you want to do is you want to start, before anything happens, scenario planning for different things and what would happen. We cannot predict that there will be a storm for 40 days and nobody will go outside and therefore nobody's going to buy our ice cream or whatever, but we can plan for it. We can see what the scenario will be and the impact and the choices that we might have to make. And it might be that if While we can't think of absolutely every possible scenario, that would be a bit mad. It's not a bad idea to think, okay, if there's another pandemic and it's going to be 2 years, how will my business be affected? What do I need to do? How much money do I need in the bank so I don't have to fire anyone? A particular piece of useful analysis would be sensitivity. So not all of your assumptions matter equally. Some businesses are highly exposed, and others depend heavily on, the economic status. So understanding which segments drive risk focuses your strategy planning and data refinement. Next, you want to, once you've done a few scenarios and you've kind of got an idea that you can sort of break out the bank and say, well, last time we ran this scenario, this is what we saw. Scenario planning only works if conditions are monitored continuously. And this is where I think it gets kind of difficult. So static models build once a year, they quickly lose relevance when economic signals begin to shift. You can't do once a year forecast planning, basically. Leading indicators such as consumer confidence, venture funding levels, unemployment trends, wage growth, business sentiment often move before retention metrics do. And so watching those indicators can provide advance warning of potential pressure. And at the same time, segment level retention tracking is critical, especially as I was saying about economically sensitive cohorts, which show stress weeks or months before sort of blending metrics reveal those meaningful declines. And that's where I think it gets difficult, because this is all external data that you then have to model. You're modeling it just to see what's happening. And I think the cost and time of doing that and doing it well, because it's difficult to do well, is not really worth it for most businesses. Like, I would take a few key metrics that maybe you want to import and just focus on one thing, and it might be the unemployment rate, it might be inflation, it might be the cost of a Freddo. If you're in the UK, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But all of these kind of things that people use to model and understand where the economy is, maybe just pick one of those to monitor on an ongoing basis, unless you're a bigger size business or you're in a category where it's a lot more economically sensitive, which would make more sense. The object is not to forecast macroeconomic with precision. It's sort of to detect vulnerability earlier, to understand which segments are exposed and adjust pricing, change your retention strategy and capital allocation before that pressure becomes sort of systematic. So building price sensitivity models, the most practical way to incorporate like economic risk into like LTV modeling is through price sensitivity scoring most of the time. So rather than trying to predict the world, you identify which customers are more likely to react when conditions tighten. So observable behavioral signals provide strong indicators of elasticity. So if they are picking entry tier selections, if they are heavily reliant on discounts, if they have a history of negotiating a lot, if there's payment failures, if there's downgrade patterns, and even the ratio between like usage intensity and price paid will reveal how sensitive a customer may be to cost pressures. And customers who only convert with promotions or regularly question pricing typically respond quicker to economic stress. That's just obvious. So when you combine all those signals into a structured sensitivity score, that would say Oliver has a score of 75%, Emily has a score of 24%, you know that I'm much more likely to churn. You then move away from just assumptions to measurable risk segmentation. High sensitivity customers can be proactively supported through pricing flexibility, through clear value communication, or simplified plans before churn materializes. Low sensitivity customers can be prioritized for expansion, premium positioning, long-term investment. And if you start to get more Olivers and less Emilys, then that's a sign that something is going wrong. And so that approach improves more than retention strategy. It enables sort of pricing decisions to be smarter. It empowers more realistic scenario forecasting, and it's just a generally easier way of doing it. So if you want to move from static forecast to sort of an adaptive strategy, you should understand that economic conditions are never stable. Like, there's always cycles, and inevitably you will face unpleasant surprises in the future. Static projections are useful on a one-off basis, and they're always built on historical averages, but they will break when something suddenly changes, and things are always suddenly changing in our modern world. And so if you can embed economic sensitivity into your lifetime value models and into your CRM, then that will have a much bigger impact in terms of you figuring out who your price sensitive customers and being able to act faster. So that's how economic forces can affect your customers and an easier way of figuring that out. Thanks for watching, and tune in next week for another Gin with Gwyn.